매해 연말 연시가 되면 저는 동일한 고민을
Apology for the delay. Today's passage is Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24, 25. Every year, when the end of the year approaches, I have same worries. This year was no exception, just like every Christmas. About half of our church members attend to a New Year's Eve services, only the half. No matter what do we do as a church, it seems like it's only half done. In particular, we have a time to set our goals for the new year and a resolved run together through the New Year's Eve services and special dawn prayers meeting. We call that a family prayers meeting, but only half of the church members are there. It's a shortcoming thing for the beginning of the new year. So I was always thinking what we should do this. If you look at the local churches around me, I try to get some new ideas. Maybe that we don't do a New Year's service or New Year's Eve services. Maybe there are too many services that we can skip some. Then we can just have a short break. I also had that ideas. So, but at the same time that I have to keep the habit of asking or requesting all the small family churches, all the church members that please come to the New Year's services and please come to it. So we did it. Anyway, it's a shortcoming or not, so I suggested to the church members who came to Singapore late this year that we listen to who attended to these coming services. That engraved the sermon motto in our hearts and run towards the goal of our one heart, so that I reminded every member of the church. After the services, I asked some small church leaders, small house, like family church leaders, to make some of the summaries of the service, the speech or the sermon in the service. As soon as the service is over, the one person came to running and volunteered after hearing the New Year's service's sermon. Some family churches actively started talking about that they would love to volunteer into summarizing the services. On the other hand, there are some other family churches that have no voices or no opinions. So some people say, what are we doing here? Why are we not doing anything? So we have all the various opinions and thoughts. Yet if that diversity leads to division, it can be a problem in a church. So we can summarize this question. That let's work hard versus do we really have to do it in that way? When the opinions are divided like this, the one who have the power are usually those who shout out, let's work hard. In general, unless it is theft or evil, the let's work hard side has a justification. It has a rationale better. So those who make the negative statements like, do we really have to do this in this way, are criticized and condemned as not zealous or not faithful, maybe lazy. There's no formula, but usually it has a connection that when you say let's do it, actually having a little bit louder voice than the ones who are not. So in our today's passages in Hebrews in chapter 10, let us consider one another to start with love and good deeds. So how do you read this? How do you read this? This sounds quite provocative, right? Quite suggestive. But at the same time, we're knowing that it is a great truth that we have to do it on our best together. But if the ones who hasn't passion is starting to divide who are not and who are not as diligent as them, that if I can say. And I said it will become a problem in the church. However, saying who are going to do it and those who are not thinking about it, don't do it. It's not a good idea either. Since it has led to even more, we should definitely be diligent. However, when we're diligent, we should not easily criticize those who think differently from us as being lazy. In fact, today's sermon is a supplement to the previous two weeks of family morning prayer meetings that we held every Saturday morning, 7:30. Please listen to the family morning prayer services sermon together in a YouTube if you want, or not, to think more deeply about today's sermon and apply it into your life. There is a tendency we to think that the laziness must be overcome. It must be cut off. But the truly important thing about the laziness is to know the true nature of laziness. The true nature of laziness. In order to know the true nature of the laziness, we need to be able to distinguish between the laziness that people generally refer to and the laziness and the religious senses that the Bible speaks of. Let me give you an example. When we say someone is lazy, what kind of person came to your mind? Have you ever heard? It's called the corpse play. Corpse play refers to that you're doing nothing, but you just lay down on the floor on your couch doing nothing, just like corpse. But when you think like these people who are just like lazily, lay down on the couch, so-called it's a couch potato, that you can find there's a one movement of that person. His or her finger is moving for the remote controller. Right? If the remote control battery is gone, what would that person do then? He or she would quickly run out and buy new batteries to make the remote controller moving. The person would never be lazy. Let me share one story. There's one person in an emergency room at the hospital with a heart attack and went to the hospital. They did CPR, but he couldn't survive and died eventually. But when the doctor looked at his dead person, he saw something strange. On the screen that you can see is a Korean polka called Hwatu. Left one is number 3 and the right one is a number 8. And the Sakura Kwang and the Pagongsan Kwang. The combination of this is a jackpot because it's the best combination of the game Hwatu, Korean polka. Anyway, the guy who died in the ER was holding these two cards in his palm. He got a heart attack because he was too happy to having this jackpot combination. When I think of the gambler, I think that, hey, why does the person live so lazily? Although they seem to be doing nothing, gamblers gamble with their lives at stake. They gamble so hard that they don't miss the card even when they die of a heart attack. They find the money and they hide it at the home and they find a bank book and go gambling, risking their lives. It's common to stay all night and they gamble for the days without sleeping or eating until they catch a jackpot and die of a heart attack because they were so happy. Lazy people have also zeal. However, it is wrong kind of the zeal. The direction of their zeal is very, very wrong. The Bible defines the laziness of the fellows. In the Second Chronicles and chapter 29, there is a description of the laziness. Second Chronicles and chapter 29, verse 11. My sons, don't be lazy anymore. King Hezekiah tells the priest and the Levites, don't be lazy. The expression sons mentioned here was usually used by adults, and at the time to warmly call young people. Why did King Hezekiah say, don't be lazy? There's a hint in the first part of this verse, the chapter, I mean. So the verse 6 and 7 say, 6. Our ancestors sinned and died evil. In the eyes of the Lord our God, they forsook God and turned their faces away from the Lord's sanctuary, and they shut the doors of the vestibules, put out all the lamps, and did not burn incense in the sanctuary, and did not offer burnt offerings to the God of Israel. When Hezekiah saw that Israel was not offering sacrifices to God, he is distressed and said, you are doing evil in the eyes of the God. In today's terms, this means you did not worship. You didn't come to worship. The reason for this was what you being lazy. Because you are lazy, you neglected worship and did not offer burnt offerings. And so you become corrupt and will punish it by God. Now here, sin is not doing something wrong or evil, but rather not doing something that you have to do. It is saying that to not worship God is a sin, and there are 7 deadly sins in the Middle Ages: pride, greed, envy, anger, lust, gluttony, and laziness. It's called 7 Deadly Sins. There are also a movie title about it, The 7 too. Hieronymus Bosch, who's a painter, painted the 7 Deadly Sins that you can see on the screen. In the center circle, it is divided into the 7 sections that describing each deadly sins of 7. And in each 4 corners, there's a description of the people who have sinned these 7 great sins, how will be punished after death. And if you enlarge the picture of the laziness, and there's a Latin side, it's called akidia, means laziness. And this is a description, the picture of the person who is lazy. Then you can see the nun in the left side who's holding the Bible and the Catholic brace. And she's trying to talking to someone who is just sitting onto the chair, but the guy who is sitting in the chairs in front of the fireplace, and the nun is suggesting him or her to please hear the God's message, and the person who is sitting under the chair is not really listening to it, but snoozing. This is called akidia, which is laziness. So who is the person? Or what is laziness in a biblical sense? It is a laziness that breaks the relationship with God. At the beginning of every year, many people want to stop being lazy. So we always try to think of the New Year's resolution. We try to write down, even so. We want to overcome laziness. We want to overcome the laziness. We want to overcome it, really. We desperately want to do something to overcome it. We diligently to do this and that. In a biblical way that we said that I want to overcome my faith, the difficult times of my faith, that they want to go this. They go to other place here and there. And a special seminars and occasions, which is held by our famous pastors, all the church places. But is this really helpful? Are they really helpful? That every time that we're attending this special seminars, we should become saints already. Our emotions don't do anything or change our lives. I used to watch a lot of Chinese or Hong Kong movies. I also watch a lot of Western movies too. Among them, the movie that I still remember is A Drunken Master by Jackie Chan. Well, I found that most of these movies have similar patterns. A person, the main character, is wronged and his parents are killed by bandits or something, and so he practices martial arts to get revenge or goes to a master to learn how to shoot a gun in a Western movie cases. So in a Drunken Master movie, where the main character goes a martial arts master to get revenge in the same plot, he meets the master of the drunken martial arts, and I thought when I was watching a movie that he would teach Jackie Chan some great martial arts and techniques, but the master made him fetch water every day. Jackie must be annoyed, right? He was annoyed in the movie. We all remember the Gus Hiddink, the football manager of the Korean national football team in the year 2002 World Cup. But the first thing that he was doing the physical training for the team. We believe that the Korean national football team, our strongness was the physical strength, but it wasn't. He pointed out that it's a weakness of the team. So he focused on the physical training and only selected the players that he had the stamina to play for 90 minutes, maybe even more over than 90 minutes. In both halves, the player who didn't have this stamina was excluded from the starting liners, no matter how famous they were, no matter how good foot skills or fit skills they had. The representative of this player is about Chi-sung Park, a crown prince of the Hiddings era, a man with two hearts, nicknamed by Manchester United fans. If you are believers at least, in order to overcome laziness, we must be faithful to the basics, meeting God, worship, prayer, and intimate encounters. Don't look for the other secrets. And be faithful to worship. This is a story we have heard so many times, and have heard so many times of our lives in church, right? But we are not doing this. If you think of the worship as a simple ritual of ceremony, the weekly ceremony, it is not. We must meet God and communicate with Him. Think carefully about what we are passionate about, what we are lazy about. The things that we are passionate about are the things that we want and desire. On the other hand, the one thing that we are most lazy about the things that we don't want to do. In order to overcome this problem of the laziness, we must be able to honestly see before God what our priorities and passions are. People often say this, where you are investing the most of the time right now, and where is most of your money in your wallet being spent. If you look at that, you will know who you are. You will know what you want. Where are you diligent and where are you lazy can be clearly seen by looking at your time and your wallet. In other words, laziness is not doing nothing and laughing and goofing around, but a problem of what you are interested in now. This should be the measure. Then if we are lazy or not. The true nature of the laziness is not being interested in God. Cut the communication with our God. is a laziness defined by Bible. It can be said that the greatest problem is in terms of the faith, and the greatest problem of sin is a disconnection of communication with God. Why do big problems arise when our relationship and communication with God are neglected? What would be the problem? I had a gray hair even when I was newly married in my 30s. So when I was coming in, it's like someone was calling me from behind my back, "Uncle, uncle." I'm a pastor, right? So I have a quite sensitive sense of it. So when someone is like saying pastor, even though it's not calling myself, that I automatically look back. But when someone is calling me uncle from my behind, that I don't know. I still simply cannot connect that. The fact that someone is calling me by uncle. Just like this, our ears respond to the sound that we are interested in, we are familiar with. In Matthew chapter 25, there is a parable of the talents that we are all familiar with. The master entrusted the money to his servants as he goes abroad. 1 talent, 2 talents, 5 talents, respectively. But the servants with the 1 talent who received did nothing with it and buried it in the ground. They do not respond to it at all. When the master returns, what did he say to his servant? In Matthew chapter 25, verse 26, the master answered and said to him, "You wicked and lazy servant." What does it say to you? You lazy servant, wicked and lazy servant. Wickedness is identified with laziness. This is a scary thing. When we say that we are lazy before God, it's the same as being evil. We're not interested in the master's will. Now responding to the Lord's words all means that we have no relationship with the master, then that is called laziness, and wickedness equals evil. So how can we overcome these problems of laziness? A theologian named Matthew Fox said something really interesting and great. What is the prescription for laziness? The cure for laziness is not a resolution to be diligent. To cure laziness, you should rediscover the fire within you. And you should burn that fire again. A fire is a desire. It means that what I have to do, what I want to do. What is the thing that you have to do and you want to do? What God has called you as a Christian. This is what it is. What God has called us. Our calling must come alive. It should be our fire and desire inside of our hearts. In Exodus chapter 3, there is something called Moses calling. God calls Moses in the midst of the flame of the thorn bush. The fire is fire, but the fire was not burning the thorn bush wood. When God calls Moses, Moses, when Moses was called, what was Moses' job at the time? He was a shepherd in the middle of the desert for 40 years. The Bible doesn't disparage Moses' job because he was a shepherd. There's no hint that Moses was lazy during these 40 years than when he was being a shepherd. He must be very, very diligent, waking up very early, going to bed quite late. Probably have to wake up in the middle of the night because to take care of his herd. he must be diligent, right? He must be diligent in shepherding. Even when we see he brought the sheep all the way to the Mount Horeb, that we can see how diligently he lived to feed his flock. But it's really interesting. Moses lived diligently in a way. Moses was doing his best, but Exodus chapter 3 is called the chapter of calling. God called Moses and gave him a calling. Before receiving the calling, that Moses was not a lazy person in a general sense, in a common sense. He was not. He worked very hard. He was a person who faithfully did the work given to him. But God called him out and gave him a calling. He rekindled the flame that had been extinguishing in his heart when he was raised as a prince of Egypt. Prince of Egypt. Why he was trained as a prince of Egypt? There is a reason. There was a reason always. Why did God pull Moses out of the shepherding? It was because shepherding was not his calling. It wasn't because shepherding was a trivial task. Moses had already been educated by God, become a leader of the son of the king in the palace for 40 years. He had his reason to be trained. He had reason to be called. Today, I want to challenge you. Do you have a spark in your heart? Is the calling that God has called you clear? It may sound like a very cliche that we have heard this too many times. But if these parts are not clear, we cannot help but be lazy before God. You are lazy if you're not coping with His calling. If this part is not clear. I really liked comic books when I was much younger in primary school. I think I read all the comics that was available in a bookstore. There was a weekly the comics or the cartoon magazine that I have never missed a week. Not just the comic weekly magazines like a boys' donga or like boys' book, but I read them so diligently. The master of the comic book store would pick out the new comics and prepare for me. Eventually, the comic book store, the cafe, has moved quite far, but I walk to there every day for 45 minutes, single way, to get there. Also, I was really into the table tennis when I was in middle school. I literally went to church every day to play table tennis. So my grandmother couldn't stand for it. That he had to break all my table tennis rackets and then threw them away. And last year, in my middle school, I really liked writing an article, so I tried to be a poet. I have so many poetries myself. And in high school, that I loved singing, so we formed the men's choir. So we practiced ourselves. That we did the concert like here and there in the different churches. And I went to university. And at college, that I become absorbed in the philosophy. I read books like Hegel's Dialectics, Kegel's Existential Dialectics, and Husserl's and Phenomenology. And I try to critically view society and the system and reform it. Although I had a different views of the activists, I start to hang out with them. And because I become sarcastic and critical about the society, and become observed in utilitarianism, which says that the state power should be limited for the sake of the individual freedom. The reason why I was falling into the utilitarianism, so I was really into the John Stewart order meals, and they become my glass to looking at the society through. So I was into this and that. But there was a time that when I was personally met myself with God, there was a time that I confessed that God truly loves me. At the time, I felt regretful. With all the happiness is coming in. So I was super, super happy to meet God. But I also felt regretful when He was calling me back, saying, "Oh, I have wasted my life so far. I've always lived diligently. I devoted myself to be a pastor. I devoted myself to study theology. I felt sorry for the life that I had lived for so far, even if I have lived diligently always. At the time, I made a decision. I must live in the down. It was a quite common thing by then to live living in the down. It's a quite tiring thing to starting your day as a pastor in the morning and down. Most of the pastors at the time that had the same pattern after leading the down like early morning services. There's a tendency we go home and sleep for an hour or two and then come back to the office and continue to work. However, I thought that time I really, really loved the time up to the morning service, the morning prayers. It was a time that no one would bother me. It was a time of peace. It was a time that only I could use. That was when I was 24 years old. I must live in the dawn. Before the time that I was sick, that I had a hard time, I could no longer preach or do the pastoral work. I think I lived in the dawn very diligently. The most important time that made me able to serve as a pastor of our church was the time that when God called me and awakened my calling. I think that made my life very strategic. I could make all a God's wisdom decision in that time. The most important thing to overcome laziness is when the flame of that God calls us begins to burn again. That is when our lives become focused. Well, young people may think that this is something the old people say when they hear this. This is such a cliche. But they may think it's a popular philosophy of life, the success from the past. But however, I think there is something that it does not change in our lives. God's calling ignites our lives. It makes our lives focused. That is why it frees us from our laziness. I can confirm that I have been called. I will ask you one question. Now I will ask you one question, so answer inwardly yourself. You came to worship on Sunday, but do you have the passion to come to the worship every week? Or do you sometimes not want to come? Speak to yourself, answer inwardly. Here's another one. I'll ask you again. Do I, as a pastor, have times when I do not want to come to the church? Do I not? Answer inwardly. Don't speak it out, your opinion about me, please. I do ministry. I also do ministry. But there are times when I don't want to do it, that I'm scared of standing in front of you, coming up to the preaching podium here. I'm not in the right frame of the mind to preach. But the important thing is to keep your position even in your most difficult times. Living your calling means keeping your position no matter what. If I were to talk about the opposites of the laziness, it would be consistency. When we develop feelings of dislike and an environment we don't like, we lose our consistency and fail to keep our position. That's when we become lazy. If you don't, you fall into laziness. We keep our position because we have this calling. Would you guess that who the church members are that I am most thankful for as a pastor? They are the ones that who keep their positions. They must have many things going on for them. They must have things that the pastor don't know about, their internal stories, what's going on in their lives. How many things can happen? Job changes, childbirth, funerals, marriages. But I'm so thankful that they keep their positions consistently. Even I am thankful for them. Guess how God will thank to them, knowing every story, every difficulties of them. There are many professional sports leagues in Korea, but the baseball is one of the most popular sports. As professional player managers, about who is the most important position in baseball is pitcher. Someone else professional player, the baseball managers and the pitchers. Who do you think the most valuable pitcher for this team? The manager said that the best pitcher is the one who consistently gets 10 wins every year. Every year. 10 wins every year. Is the best pitcher that managers are praising. A pitcher who wins 20 games a year and then fails to win like 5 games in the next year, or no matter how good his skills were, he couldn't be the best pitcher because managers cannot trust him. 20 last year, 5 this year. He's not best pitcher, but the one who can consistently win 10 games every season throughout 10 years of his career or 15 is the best pitcher. Who are the best pitchers as we live in a court before God? Those who can faithfully keep their positions all the time. Sometimes I have people who make a great resolutions. God, I will become a truly great person of prayer. But what is really important is praying for 1 minute a day starting today and every day as on. In old tales in Judaism, when Noah was building his ark, in Judaism's tale, that then Noah was planting the woods, was the first step of the making his ark. We thought that he just going to the forest and chopped out all the logs, but not that he was planting planting a wood and making woods for his ark. We are missing the part.
다른 엄청난 위대한 업적을 여러분 보고 하나님께서 하라고 하시지 않아요. 꾸준하게 우리를 향한 부르심을 따라 오늘 한 걸음을 걸어 나가시는 우리 모두가 되기를 주님의 이름으로 축원드립니다. 아멘. 우리 이 시간 찬양하며 나갑니다. 주님 내 길을 아십니다. 나는 세상 잡다한 소리 때문에 하나님의 음성을 들을 수가 없어서 길이 어디 있는지 모르겠어요. 방황해요. 그런데 그때 주님께서 변함없는 계획이 있대요. 내가 너를 이곳으로 불렀다. 소명을 주시면서 하나님께서 우리와 함께 이 길을 가자고 합니다. 나의 모든 걸음 인도하여 주신 그분을 고백하면서 우리 결심하며 하나님 앞에 나아가도록 합니다.
주님 내 길 아시네. 흔들린 그 길에도 함께 주님 내 일 아시네. 멈춰진 나의 삶에도 늘 함께 나의 힘이 되신 주 항상 같은 곳에서 주가 나의 도움 되시네. 나의 길이 되신 주 변함없으신 계획 주가 나의 모든 걸음 되시네. 주님 내 길 아시네. 흔들린 그 길에도 함께 주님 내 일 아시네. 멈춰진 나의 삶에도 늘 함께 나의 힘이 되신
항상 같은 곳에서
항상 같은 곳에서 주가 나의 도움 되시네. 나의 길이 되신 주 변함없으신 계획 주가 나의 모든 걸음 되시네. 나의 힘이 되신 주 항상 같은 곳에서 주가 나의 도움 되시네. 나의 길이 되신 주 변함없으신 계획 주가 나의 모든 걸음 되시네. 나의 힘이 되신 주 항상 같은 곳에서 주가 나의 도움 되시네. 나의 길이 되신 주 변함없으신 계획 주가 나의 모든 걸음 되
우리 다 같이 일어나서